Yes. Yes, we do have a culture. If you clicked on this video, obviously you can see that the title of this video is Do African Americans Have a Culture? Short answer, yes. I just want to get that clear off the bat. After the intro, I'm going to get into why we do have a culture, why some people maybe don't think that African Americans have a culture, and just some tips for you and how you can help educate others in knowing that African Americans, yes, we do have a culture. If you came here, clicked on this video thinking like, okay, she's gonna prove why African Americans don't have a culture, please go ahead and like and share this video and watch for yourself so you can learn that you are wrong. We're about to get into the intro and we're about to get to it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you all are doing well. There's a lot going on in the world right now. We're just gonna stay positive and keep it pushing. But yes, there's this question of, do African Americans have a culture? And it's so interesting because even in undergrad, when I was studying African American studies, even some people in my class would just be like, so do African Americans really have a culture? Because Africans were brought to America on slave ships and just kind of forced here. But it's like, you know, we've been able to carve out our own lane, but can we call that own lane that we've carved out a culture? Can we call the food that we've, you know, kind of created, and the music and the dialogue and the ebonics and things that we have, you know, created in this America a culture? And I'm basically here to say yes.
I am home. I am the foundation of what we call home.
And that's what culture is. Every single culture is just some people's adaptation or just ways of, you know, just being able to connect with one another based on, you know, a shared physical experience or social experience that they have to go through. So African Americans 100% have a culture, and it's important to note that this is not American culture. So African American culture is not American culture. It's its own thing, it's its own subset, it's its own part, and we're about to get really into it. So as I've kind of stated, as we know, Africans were brought to the US without their consent, forced colonization, brought here, worked the fields, worked as slaves, had kids born into slavery, whatever, essentially kind of planted roots into the US, and then one day we were freed. I put the air quotes around freed because we still were, you know, are imprisoned, of course. And of course, the systems at play are still at play, you know, systematic racism, school to prison pipeline, things like that, that keep us down, of course. But through this bringing of Africans to this land, we as people, as you know, the descendants, have kind of had to be like, okay, well, since we're here, we don't really speak this, we speak English, you know, we don't know our native tongue. I can't necessarily go back to Africa because I don't know where I'm from. I cannot afford a plane ticket. I'm not about to get back on the boat. We don't know our native, you know, culture and music and things like that. We've then had to create a whole new lane for us. And that, so a big reason why people don't think African Americans have a culture is because a lot of people just feel like, okay, well, you know, technically if Africans weren't taken from the land, would African Americans still have a culture? And it's like, okay, sure, we can think about that all day, but at the end of the day, this is where we are. Every culture essentially is, you know, people having to figure out a way that works for their group of people because of their shared experiences. So that's really all a culture, you know, in terms of forming a culture, that's really all it is. And African Americans 100% fall into that category. So getting into food, for example, just one example. So as we know, soul food is like the African American cultural cuisine. So, you know, we know soul food as like, you know, fried chicken, you know, some yams, some mac and cheese, you know, some mashed potatoes, you know, some cornbread, greens, you know. Love soul food. But really, the reason that soul food actually became like, you know, our culture's food, I mean African American culture's food, is because it was the food, this kind of the scraps that the slaves were given. And it's like, okay, so massa's bland food. Massa's only giving us, the vegetables that no one wants to eat, which are like the greens and things like that. So we're gonna figure out a way to make this up, put a little seasoning in it, and make it taste good. Chitlins, I never had chitlins. My dad talks about eating them and loving them. I heard they smell bad, but if someone makes me chitlins, I will eat them. But that's like the intestines of the chicken or the pig, I think. I will put it on the screen when I find the right answer. And that's essentially what soul food is. So soul food is kind of the rejected like food that was given to the slaves and a way to kind of turn it around. And I mean, now look, like soul food is, I feel like soul food is just a cultural staple in the African American community. Not that, every African American person loves soul food or grew up necessarily eating it all the time. Maybe some did, maybe some didn't. But still, that's like the food of our people. So, that's just one example. And these kinds of things help. Like if somebody is like, African Americans don't really have a culture, or it's kind of like, y'all were stolen. Y'all just lost y'all culture. And I mean, yes, and people were stolen from all parts of Africa. So like there was a culture that, let's say like, maybe we had before that we lost 100%. But it's like the culture that we've had to create as a result of being taken, of being forced, into colonization is respectable, is reputable, is valid, so African American culture is a real thing, it's valid. Now, something I want to really drive home as well is that African American culture is not American culture. It's two separate things. African American culture, our culture, what we talk, how we talk, our style, the music that we create, X, Y, and Z, is not the same thing as American culture. And I think that's a reason why a lot of people do not think African Americans have a culture, because we're under this umbrella of like, America. So it's like, okay, well, since you're under the umbrella of America, like technically it is American culture, so everyone can take from it. But y'all just have your own little thing. And it's like, actually, we're African Americans, we are our own umbrella. The reason we are our own umbrella is because we had a very specific situation. We were brought here and we had to make a way, not with the help of, the greater America. We didn't have, people helping us. We had to figure out a way to get around this world our own way. And with that, we have our own culture. So it's just important to acknowledge that our grandparents, our great grandparents, they weren't doing the mashed potato. They weren't with Susie at the dance, like doing their own, they had their own little parties, their own little side parties, their own dances, their own music, so we have our culture. And a reason it's important to drive this home is because oftentimes American culture steals from Black culture. That's another reason why people don't think we have a culture, because they're just like, well, rap music, is popularized on the American radio, or is popularized, in all these, American shows or whatever. That's because American culture is known for stealing people's culture, just like they're known for stealing people. Like that's to me, now everyone, whatever, but American culture is just stolen bits of a lot of different people's culture mixed together, and here we are.
And that's the tea.
Whereas African American culture was based on, being cast out, being treated as slaves, having to fight for resistance, having to, tap into things that are natural for us, like rhythm and style and shining in the sun. And now everyone trying to use highlight, just little things like that. A good example of a way to kind of showcase this is rock and roll. So rock and roll, I feel like it's something that's seen as very American. Like, okay, Elvis Presley, since the beginning, whatever, yeah. And in actuality, like, the biggest song that Elvis Presley like dropped and people were like, what is this? It was called Hound Dog. And it was a song that actually Big Mama Thornton wrote, sang. It's the exact same song. Maybe I'll play a little. And Elvis Presley just kind of took it, and he got famous off of it. But Big Mama Thornton and a lot of other black people around this time are known for creating rock and roll. But the American mass, music, media industry, whatever, just took it and ran with it. Like really just went far. with it, so now if you like look up rock and roll, you're not gonna see like a lot of black representation, a lot of black people. You're gonna see like different things, and you're gonna think like this is white people's music, or this is white stuff, and it's like, no, it's not. So it's really important to distinguish ourselves from the American like mass media system giant, because a lot of times what we create, what black people create, is just taken or commodified and used as the American idea. And then other places, other continents, other countries look at this and they're like, okay, well, American culture is rap, is rock, is all these things, is a big melting pot. And it's like, well, y'all are being lied to as well. And that's why maybe some other people outside think African Americans are a certain way because of how we are, represented or things like that. And it's just wrong. So, I know a lot of people probably are like, of course African Americans have a culture, but I'm telling you all, there's a lot of people who really just don't think we do. Or just when they talk about, African Americans, it's like, well, Americans. Well, they're just Americans. And yes, we are Americans. Like, yes, I am American. But, African Americans just have our own subset culture. We have our own thing. We are under our own umbrella. So now we're going to get into some tips. So what should you do if somebody calls you out for not having a culture? This is for tips for people who are African American or people who are not African American. So the first tip would be to not group together African American culture and American culture. Don't do it. Whether that's your culture, don't think that your African American culture is American culture, because it's not. We have our own culture. We have our own way of, doing things, way of, maneuvering this land that we were brought to, that we worked and created. But of course, it was stolen from Native Americans. But, we do have our own culture. So just basically, again, all this to say, do not lump the two. Now, African American history, I think can be counted as American history, and I think it should be counted as American history, just like I think Native American history should be counted as American history, for sure. Just like, especially because, African Americans built this land, and I think with that, Americans should grow up learning about black people more than just that we were slaves and then Martin Luther King freed us. Like way more. They should be learning about, the ins and outs, the things I talk about on my channel. So, that's just a separate side note. But the next tip number 2, don't let people tell you African Americans don't have a culture. Don't let people tell you that. There might be intellectual people that are like, this is why, blah, 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 blah. No. And don't think that African Americans do not have a culture. Now, while you might be watching this and you're like, well, if you really have a culture, then where's y'all land, or where's y'all language? One, we have a language. Maybe it's called Ebonics. Maybe it's called, non-professional speech. Maybe it's called, words that kind of just mix together like finna or about to, or, things like that. But we do have a way of speaking, and we do make words cool. And in terms of a place, yes, it's not the same as, Africa or Latin America or Europe, where, it's like a specific continent, or Asia, a specific continent with a certain group of people. Again, we are African people, so I'm not trying to make it seem like we're not African. Like, we are African people. So, but there have been cities that were Black American cities. There were these, places, Harlem, DC was known as Chocolate City, but gentrification. And that's why history is so important, to know the truth, to know that we were here. We did take up space. I talked about in a previous video I did, but Black Wall Street in Oklahoma, Black businesses, Black people living, Black families, thriving, living, and again, it just got burned down. But you know, a lot of now gentrification, now it's cool to live in Inglewood or Compton or things like that. Like, so, you know, just because we don't have like obviously like a whole, like, you know, we're not all of the US, we did build these, you know, places for us to stay in and be comfortable in, and they got taken away or torn apart or disassembled. And you know, now there are of course like, you know, black cities and things like that, but it's just so different now. And my last tip would just be to be proud. I know it's a lot easier to just sit here and be like, be proud. But like, you know, and then maybe you're on your journey. Like maybe you're still trying to learn stuff. Maybe you're just still trying to figure it out for yourself. But you know, be proud of, you know, where we've come from. Be proud of the way that our ancestors have had to forge a way in this, you know, nation, and they've done it, and we are here to continue to do it. But you know, be proud, and don't, you know, if people are, I feel like there's a lot of people who will be like, you know, you're overreacting when, you know, you're, you know, arguing with someone about, you know, whether or not to say the N-word, or you're overreacting when you're getting mad that, you know, all these white people are now saying on fleek or period and things like that. And the thing is, you know, what America does so well is like brainwash people and make it seem like, you know, well, this is just should be all taken. Like we're all just a melting pot. We're all just so close together. We're all kind of the same. So we can just pick off of each other's little thing. And it's like, no, because what happens then is that things get erased. People get erased. People's experiences, people's, you know, contributions to the culture get erased. I know okay, I don't play Fortnite, but I know like there was this whole thing because like I guess some of the characters on like Fortnite were like dancing and doing like, you know, black dances or whatever. And the person who I think invented, I don't know if it was a Millie Rock or something, was trying to sue Fortnite because they were just like, what are you doing? This is like something I created. This is a black dance. This is something, you know, that I, you know, built, and y'all just took it and not even trying to pay me or anything for it. You know, so it can easily just be taken and just, oh, everyone should use it. And it's like, no, 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 no. You know, so really just be proud of your culture and just, you know, hold on to it and defend it, fight for it, you know, be proud in it, pass it on. We're the only people who can celebrate blackness right now in this time period. In the future, hopefully, if we keep, you know, these traditions alive, people will continue to celebrate blackness and celebrate the fact that we have a culture, you know, and it's just important to continue to do this for our ancestors, for who we are now, and for the future generations. So be proud of where you come from, and if something's not right to you, speak on it. If you don't feel right, if something's not feeling good, you know, people are just doing things where you're just like, I don't like this, I feel like you took this, speak on it, because for the most part, you're probably valid. You are valid, you have a culture, fight for it. And thank you so much for tuning in. Please continue to like and share these videos, y'all. Like, I feel like there's just, I'm really happy to hear like when people just are able to learn from my videos, because I'm just like, I don't know, like it is a lot when you're just doing this just to do it, you know, just to let people know. But I want to do it. Like I want to share this knowledge, and I want everyone to know that black knowledge is black power. So thank you so much. Please like, share, continue to subscribe. Have a good week. Stay blessed, stay alive, stay safe, and I will see y'all soon.